This is a story run, a cinematic audio adventure built to be heard, not skimmed. Episode 2 begins now. The door sealed behind Tony with a sound that was not a slam. It was softer than that. Final. Stone met stone with the certainty of something that had closed many times before, and would close many times again. The sound echoed once through the chamber, then vanished, swallowed by a silence so deep it felt padded. Tony stood frozen, one hand still half raised where the seam had been. Darkness pressed in around him, complete but not empty. He could feel space, height, distance. The air was cold, but not hostile. It smelled faintly of stone and old water, the way underground places did. Not decay, just age. Tony forced himself to breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Panic was loud. Panic made bad decisions. The map inside his bag pulsed once, gently, like a heartbeat reminding him he was still alive. "Hello?" Tony said, hating the way his voice echoed back to him. No answer. He stood still long enough for his eyes to begin adjusting. At first, there was nothing but darkness. Then, gradients. The suggestion of walls. A floor that sloped slightly downward. The chamber was larger than he'd expected. Vault was the right word. Not a room, not a cave. Something constructed, deliberate. The walls curved upward into shadow. Smooth in some places, rough in others, like the builders had blended natural rock with worked stone. And then Tony saw the light. Not a torch, not a flame. A soft, pale glow emanated from the center of the chamber, steady and calm, like moonlight trapped in glass. Tony took a cautious step forward. The sound of his boot against the stone floor echoed, then faded. The chamber did not respond. Another step. The light grew clearer, revealing a low stone platform at the center of the vault. It was circular, etched with symbols that matched the ones on the map, some familiar, some new, all precise. At the center of the platform stood something tall. Someone. Tony stopped. The figure was not human. It had the general shape of one. Upright, symmetrical, but no detail resolved properly. Its surface looked like stone and mist at once, edges shifting subtly as if refusing to settle into one form. It did not breathe, and yet the chamber seemed to breathe in its place. Tony's heart thudded in his chest. This was the guardian, or the custodian. He didn't know the name yet, but instinct told him this was the presence he'd felt since the cemetery. The thing behind the watching. The figure did not move, did not speak, did not react. Tony's throat tightened. He'd expected fear, terror, some instinctive flight response. Instead, what he felt was pressure, not physical, moral. Like standing in front of someone who could see every version of you at once. The good, the cowardly, the tired, the angry, and was not impressed by any of them. Tony cleared his throat. "I didn't mean to steal anything," he said, because it felt important to say it out loud. The figure did not respond. The light brightened slightly. Tony's gaze dropped to the platform. Carved into the stone, directly in front of the figure, were words. Not English, but Tony understood them anyway. Rule 1. Opening is easier than closing. His chest constricted. "I saw that," he murmured. Outside, the figure shifted, just slightly. The movement was subtle, like a change in gravity rather than motion. The air in the chamber adjusted around it. When it spoke, The voice did not come from a mouth. It came from everywhere. You opened what was sealed. Tony's breath caught. The voice was deep, but not loud. Ancient, but not slow. It carried no threat, no warmth, just certainty. Tony nodded once, because lying felt pointless. Yes, you were not invited. Tony winced. Yeah, that sounds right. The light dimmed, then steadied. And yet, the voice continued, you were allowed. Tony frowned. What's the difference? A pause, not hesitation, consideration. Invitation is desire, the voice said. Allowance is judgment. Tony gulped. So, you judged me? Yes. Tony waited. Nothing else came. Okay, he said eventually, and the figure's surface rippled faintly, like wind over sand. You do not know what you have entered. Tony nodded. That also sounds right. You do not know what is contained here. Fair. You do not know the cost of opening, nor the cost of closing. Tony's jaw tightened. Then why let me in? The chamber seemed to lean inward. Because you noticed. The word landed heavier than Tony expected. Noticed? What? He asked. The figure did not answer immediately. Instead, the light shifted, spreading outward across the chamber walls. As it did, shapes emerged from the stone. Carvings Tony hadn't seen before. Scenes. A battlefield. Frozen in motion. Men in old armor. Shields locked. Faces twisted in effort and fear. A ship breaking apart in a storm. Crew clinging to rigging as waves swallowed them. A crown placed on a bowed head. A hand reaching for gold. Another hand pulling it back. Tony's breath slowed. These are memories? He asked. Records, the voice replied. Witnessed moments. Yours? Not mine. Tony stared. Then whose? The figure turned slightly, and Tony had the strange sensation of being examined from multiple angles at once. Those who failed, the voice said. Tony's stomach dropped. Failed? What? The carvings shifted. The battlefield scene darkened, figures blurring. The ship vanished beneath stone waves. Only the reaching hand remained, frozen inches from something unseen. They opened, the voice said, and they took. Tony's ribs seemed to contract. Took what? The light pulsed once. Power. Tony exhaled slowly. This was bigger than money, bigger than treasure. The map hadn't led him to a vault full of gold. It had led him to a system, a test. Tony rubbed his palms against his jeans, grounding himself. So, what now? The figure straightened. Now, it said, you are measured. The words settled into the stone. Measured, not welcomed, not rewarded, judged. Tony nodded once. Okay. How? The chamber changed. The light withdrew from the walls and concentrated at the center of the platform, pooling like liquid moonlight. From it rose an object, not a chest, not a weapon, a door, small, free, standing, made of dark stone veined with pale lines that pulsed faintly, like something alive beneath a shell. It stood no taller than Tony's chest. There is no lock, the voice said. No hinge. Tony stared. Then, how does it open? The figure did not answer directly. What do you want from this place? It asked. The question hit harder than any threat. Tony opened his mouth, then closed it again. He could have lied. He could have said money, safety, a better life for his mom. All true. But something about the chamber demanded honesty, the way gravity demanded falling. I don't know, Tony said quietly. I want things to stop being so hard. The light did not change. Hardness is not injustice, the voice said. Tony's throat ached. I know. But it feels unfair sometimes. Unfairness is not entitlement. Tony nodded. I know that too. Silence stretched. Then the figure spoke again. You cleaned the dead. Tony stiffened. Yes. You did not profit from their names. No. You did not disturb what did not need disturbance. Tony thought of the grave, the hidden case. I disturbed that. Yes. Why was that okay? The voice echoed once. Deeper. Because it was hidden to be found. Tony frowned. By me? By someone who would notice it without seeking it. Tony's chest constricted. He'd never thought of his quiet nature as a strength. Just survival. The figure continued. This door, it said, indicating the small stone structure, leads to one of 4 truths. Tony's pulse quickened. What truths? Knowledge, fortune, strength, continuance. The words resonated through the vault. Tony didn't need explanations to understand the weight behind them. Immortality, luck, power, understanding. 4 things people destroyed the world over. You may open one, the voice said. Tony stared at the door. And then, he asked, and then you will learn why closing is harder. Tony's gut clenched. What happens if I don't open it? The figure paused. Then this vault will remain stable. And if I do, the system will shift. Tony looked up sharply. System? The figure's surface rippled. There are others like this place, it said. Connected. Balanced. Tony thought of the map changing, of lines waking up. Vaults. He whispered. Yes. How many? The light dimmed slightly. Enough. Tony forced down air. And if someone, the wrong person, opens them, balance breaks. Tony closed his eyes briefly. He thought of Eleanor, of confidence sharpened by money and certainty, of being bought. He opened his eyes. What if I open one? He said slowly, and then close it. The chamber seemed to inhale. The voice lowered. Then you will have done what many could not. Tony nodded. Okay. He stepped toward the door. The air thickened. His skin prickled, as if invisible static brushed against him. Tony hesitated, hand hovering over the door's surface. The stone was smooth, warm, alive. What's the catch? He asked. There is always a catch, the voice replied. You must choose without knowing. Tony snorted quietly. Dory of my life. He pressed his palm to the door. Nothing happened. He frowned. Is it meant to? The door opened inward, soundless, not revealing a room, but a scene. Tony gasped. The space beyond the door showed a version of his kitchen in Acton. The chipped table, the kettle, the stack of unpaid bills. Maria stood at the sink, shoulders hunched, hands red from hot water. She looked older here, more tired. The scene moved. A different moment. Maria at work, smiling at customers who didn't see her exhaustion. Another. Maria sitting alone at the table, head in her hands, bills spread out. Tony's chest burned. This isn't real, he whispered. It is possible, the voice said. The scene shifted again. Now, Tony saw himself. Older, sharper, dressed well, money on the table, a better flat. Maria sleeping peacefully in a clean bedroom. Tony's breath caught. The door pulsed. Fortune, the voice said softly. Tony felt the pull immediately. Luck, a bent world. Bills paid. Stress lifted. Doors opening. He imagined walking into a bank and being approved without question. Jobs offered. Safety secured. He imagined Maria's hands resting. Tony's fingers trembled. This is... If I take it? He asked. Yes. And the cost? The scene flickered. Just for a moment, Tony saw headlines, economic shifts, markets crashing somewhere far away. People losing something they didn't know was connected. The image vanished. Tony's heart pounded. Is that because of me? He asked. Probability redistributes, the voice said. Fortune accumulates. Tony pulled his hand back, like the door was hot. The door closed, gently. Tony staggered back a step, breathing hard. That's not fair, he said. No, the voice agreed. It is powerful. Tony rubbed his face. You said 4 truths? Yes. And I can only choose 1? Yes. And if I choose wrong, the system destabilizes. Tony laughed quietly, a sound halfway to hysteria. No pressure. Silence. Tony looked at the door again. His gaze hardened slightly. Show me another, he said. The door opened again. The scene changed. This time, Tony saw words, languages, layered over one another, flowing through his mind without confusion. He saw history not as dates, but as causes and consequences. He saw systems, patterns, lies, knowledge. Tony staggered, overwhelmed by the sheer density of it. You would understand, the voice said. Everything? Tony clenched his jaw. And the cost? The images shifted. Tony saw himself alone, people talking, but never fully understood. Distance growing as knowledge widened. Isolation. Tony's throat tightened. He backed away again. Next. The door opened a third time. Strength. Not just muscle. Presence. Tony saw himself standing unbroken, where others fell, saving people, stopping things. He felt the rush of capability, and beneath it, fear. Fear of becoming the solution to everything. Fear of never being allowed to stop. Tony closed the door himself this time, slamming his palm against the stone. No, he breathed. The vault was silent. The door remained closed. One option left. Tony knew, without opening it, what it was. Continuance. Immortality. He stepped back. I'm not opening that, he said immediately. The voice did not argue. You have Restraint, it said. That is why you were allowed here. Tony laughed weakly. Doesn't feel like a win. The figure shifted. You must now close what you opened. Tony's heart sank. I didn't take anything. You opened the door. Tony stared at it. How do I close it? The light dimmed. By choosing, the voice said. Tony froze. I just chose not to. That is not enough. The chamber seemed to tighten. The system requires intent. The voice continued. You must claim, then relinquish. Tony's breath caught. You want me to take something, he said slowly, and give it back. Yes. Tony stared at the door. Why? Because power taken unwillingly corrupts less than power desired. Tony laughed once. Hollow. That's twisted. Yes. Tony stepped forward. He placed his hand on the door again. I choose, he said, voice steady despite his racing heart. Knowledge. The door opened. The flood hit him instantly. Languages, systems, history. Too much, Tony cried out, knees buckling. The chamber vibrated. He felt his mind stretch, tear, adapt. And then, enough? Tony gasped. I give it back. The knowledge ripped away. The silence returned. Tony collapsed to his knees, breathing hard, tears streaming down his face. The door dissolved into light. The chamber steadied. The voice spoke, quieter now. You closed it. Tony laughed weakly. Barely. The figure shifted. You passed the first threshold. Tony looked up, eyes red. And the second rule? He asked hoarsely. The voice answered. You were not alone. Tony's blood went cold because behind the guardian, where there had been only shadow before, something else moved. The shadow behind the custodian moved like a thought you didn't want to have. Tony's entire body went still. Every instinct screamed run, but there was nowhere to run. The vault had sealed behind him. The air itself felt heavy with rule and consequence. The custodian did not turn. It didn't need to. You sensed it, the voice said, calm as stone. Tony's mouth went dry. What is that? The shadow slid closer, and the vault's pale light finally caught it in fragments. Not a creature, not a person, not fully anything that had a name. It looked like a tall figure made from layered darkness, but the edges weren't smooth. They fluttered with something like torn cloth or wings that had forgotten how to be wings. Its surface held no face, only a suggestion of depth where a face might have been, like a hood without a head. And yet, Tony felt its attention, like a fingertip pressed to his forehead. What is that? Tony repeated, his voice thinner now. The custodian answered in the same tone it used for rules, as if it were reading something carved into the universe. A consequence. Tony's jaw tightened. A consequence. Of what? I gave it back. You claimed, the custodian said. Therefore, the vault responded. The shadow's outline sharpened. The temperature dropped another degree. Tony's teeth clicked once before he forced them apart. So it's attached to me? He asked. The custodian did not deny it. It followed the opening, the voice said. It will seek completion. Tony's heart hammered. Completion of what? The shadow made a sound. Not A growl, not a voice, a slow exhale, like something relieved. Tony's skin crawled. The custodian finally turned slightly, its shifting surface catching the light like wet stone. "Listen," it said. Tony's breathing was too loud in his own ears. "I am listening. Your world teaches you a lie." The custodian continued. "That closing means stopping." Tony frowned. "Doesn't it? Closing means restoring balance." The voice said, "Some balances require payment." Tony stared at the shadow again. "What does it want?" he asked. The shadow leaned forward. Tony felt the pull in his chest again, that tug the map had used to guide him north. But this was different. This pull wasn't pointing to a place. It was pointing into him. "You?" the custodian said. Tony's stomach sank like a stone dropped into deep water. "No," he breathed. No. I didn't take anything. I didn't even keep the knowledge." "You touched the threshold," the custodian replied, "and the threshold touched you back." The shadow lifted one long arm. It didn't have fingers, not exactly. Its hand was an idea of a hand, divided into shapes that ended in points. It reached toward Tony. Tony flinched back, stumbling, boots scraping stone. "Don't," he said, voice cracking. "Don't touch me." The shadow paused. The custodian spoke again, its voice resonating through the chamber. "It does not act without consent." Tony blinked, startled. "It needs my permission?" "Consent is the mechanism," the custodian said. "It cannot proceed without your acknowledgement. That is how you are tested." Tony forced down air. He thought of Eleanor outside, of her confidence, of her money, of her certainty. He thought of the message on his phone. "We can see the door." He thought of the watcher on the ridge. And now this. "Why me?" Tony whispered. "Why does any of this care about me? I'm not special." The custodian's surface rippled, almost like a slow blink. "You are not chosen for greatness," it said. Tony's throat tightened. But the custodian continued, and the words landed differently. "You are chosen for restraint." Tony stared. Restraint. The thing he'd thought was just survival. The thing he'd learned, because no one had ever been coming to rescue him. The shadow shifted again. "Patient." The custodian's voice lowered. "Now," it said, "you must decide what you are." Tony's mouth went dry. "Decide what I am," he echoed. The light pooled on the platform again, and the air changed. The vault seemed to widen, creating space around Tony like a stage. 3 shapes appeared on the stone floor in front of him, etched in faint light. A hand reaching forward, a hand held back, a hand turned outward. "Palm open," the custodian spoke, and each word felt carved into Tony's ribs. 3 paths, it said. Take, refuse, offer. Tony's pulse thundered. "What happens if I take?" he asked. Voice hoarse. The shadow leaned closer, as if listening. "If you take," the custodian said, "you will be marked as an acquirer." Tony's blood went cold. Like Eleanor, the custodian didn't confirm her name, but it didn't need to. "If you refuse," it continued, "the consequence will remain unclosed. It will follow you until it finds another way." Tony stared. "So, I'm stuck with it either way." The custodian's voice held no sympathy, only fact. Paths do not remove burden, it said. They define what you become while carrying it. Tony's throat ached. And offer? He asked. The vault went very quiet. Even the shadow's movement slowed. Like the whole chamber leaned in. If you offer, the custodian said, you will learn the first cost of closing. Tony stared at the 3 glowing symbols on the floor. Take, refuse, offer. A simple choice. Except nothing about it felt simple. Tony's mind raced. If he took, the shadow would, what? Bond to him? Feed him power? Corrupt him? If he refused, it would haunt him, follow him, keep him from sleeping, keep him from living, maybe hurt people around him. If he offered what? Tony's voice came out thin. Offer what? The custodian answered. Your advantage? Tony blinked. My what? You entered because you were unnoticed, the custodian said. Because you moved through the world quietly. Because you were underestimated. Tony's chest constricted. Offer that, the custodian continued. Give up the hiding. Tony stared. Disbelief rising. You want me to, what? Become famous? The custodian's voice didn't change, but Tony felt a faint shift in pressure, as if it found his wording imprecise in a way it would never admit. Not fame, it said. Visibility? Tony's stomach twisted. He thought of London. Being invisible wasn't just a feeling. It was protection. If people didn't notice you, they didn't target you. They didn't demand things. They didn't take things. They didn't follow you. Visibility was dangerous. Visibility was what rich kids had, and they didn't even realize how loud they were. Tony's hands shook. You want me to become seen? He whispered. Yes. Tony looked at the shadow. It waited, not attacking, not rushing, waiting like a contract you had to sign yourself. The custodian's voice resonated again. Speak your choice. Tony's tongue stuck to the roof of his mouth. He thought of Maria, asleep between shifts, exhausted but smiling. He thought of the bills. He thought of the temptation of fortune, how it had dangled relief in front of him like a warm blanket. He thought of Eleanor, confident and cold, willing to buy the world if it would sell. Tony clenched his fists until his nails bit into his palms. I offer, he said. The words echoed, and the vault responded. The 3 symbols on the ground flared once. Then the offer symbol burned brighter than the others, until it was almost painful to look at. The shadow inhaled. Tony's skin prickled. The custodian spoke, and the voice sounded slightly closer now, like the vault had narrowed its focus to a point. Then the cost begins, it said. The light in the chamber shifted, running along the walls like water down stone. The carvings rearranged. Scenes flickered, blurred, reshaped. Tony suddenly saw the cemetery again. The headstone, dated 1891. His brush scraping dirt, his hand pulling out the metal case. Except, in this version, the scene didn't stop. It continued past the moment Tony remembered. The carving showed something else. A man standing behind Tony among the graves. Not the one in the dark coat. Older, different. He wore a plain, weathered coat, his hair silvered, his face lined by time rather than money. His eyes were not cruel. They were watchful. The man watched Tony lift the case. Then he turned and walked away. as if making a choice of his own. Tony stared. Throat tight. "Who is that?" he asked. The custodian answered without emotion. "A keeper." Tony's skin went cold. "The keepers are real," he whispered. "They are not a story," the custodian said. Tony's mind spun. Zara's messages. The conditional symbols. The idea of a hidden organization that monitored vault activity. This was it. But the carving continued. The keeper walked to a corner of the cemetery and placed his palm on a stone marker, similar to the one in the highlands. The stone glowed faintly. A line appeared on the ground. A path. The keeper looked back at Tony once more, then left. Tony's ribs ached. He guided me? The custodian's voice was steady. He tested whether you would notice without instruction. Tony's throat tightened. The carvings shifted again. Now, Tony saw Edinburgh. The chapel wall. The three-pronged symbol. Under ivy. Tony's knees felt weak. The scene showed Eleanor and Marcus watching from a distance, eyes sharp. It showed the moment Tony chose to keep walking instead of letting them by him. Then it shifted again. The highlands, the watcher, on the ridge. Tony leaned forward, eyes wide. The watcher was clearer now, tall, still, not human. Its outline was similar to the custodian, but harsher, as if cut from darker stone. It stood with hands clasped behind its back, like a judge watching a trial unfold. Tony's mouth went dry. That's another one of you?" he asked. The custodian replied, "A warden." Tony's stomach dropped. "What's the difference?" The custodian's voice lowered. "A custodian tests," it said. "A warden enforces." Tony felt his heart pounding in his ears. "The warden saw me open the vault." "Yes. And now I'm inside." "Yes." The shadow beside the custodian shifted again, more restless now, like it had grown impatient. Tony forced himself to breathe. "What happens now?" he asked, voice tight. "I offered visibility." "What does that mean?" The custodian raised its hand. The chamber dimmed, and in that dimness, Tony felt it. Something change in him. Not pain, not warmth, a subtle shift. Like a switch being flipped behind his eyes. Tony blinked, then blinked again. The vault's light seemed brighter, more detailed. He could see dust motes suspended in the air, each one catching light like tiny stars. He could see the fine etchings on the stone floor that he hadn't noticed earlier. He could feel the space beyond the walls, like the land above was a living blanket. Tony forced the words out. "What did you do?" he whispered. The custodian's answer was simple. "We removed your veil." Tony stared. "My what?" "Your unnoticed nature," the custodian said. "The quiet that hid you. The softness that let you pass unseen." Tony's chest seized with sudden dread. "You mean I can't hide anymore?" he said. The custodian didn't say yes. It didn't need to. Tony's hands trembled. "This is insane," he whispered. "You're saying you've made me visible to what? People? Things?" The custodian's voice echoed. "Those who seek vaults will sense you," it said. "Those who guard vaults will watch you. Those who would abuse vaults will pursue you." Tony's throat constricted. "And normal people?" he asked, almost afraid to know. The custodian's pause was fractionally longer. Normal people will notice you, it said. When you enter rooms, you will be seen. Tony's mind flashed to his life in London. The relief of being overlooked. The safety of being ignored. He'd always hated it. Always felt small under it. But now, suddenly, he missed it like air. Tony forced down air. Hard. That's the cost, he whispered. Yes, the custodian replied. It is the first cost. Tony understood something then. Visibility was the consequence. The ongoing price of entry, of offering, of being marked by the vault system. It would follow him everywhere, always. But there was still the matter of the breach. Tony's heart hammered. And the consequence? He asked, nodding toward the shadow. Does it go away now? The shadow leaned closer. The custodian's voice deepened. No, it said. Now, the consequence will be shaped. Tony's skin crawled. Shaped into what? Tony asked. The custodian pointed. Not with a finger, but with intent, toward the platform. Step forward, it said. Tony's knees threatened to lock. He didn't want to get closer to the shadow, but something in him, some stubborn part that had scrubbed moss off angels in the rain and still shown up the next day, forced his feet to move. He stepped onto the platform. The cymbals under his boots pulsed. The shadow rose taller. Tony's breath hitched. The custodian's voice was steady as a metronome. Speak your name, it said. Tony frowned. Why? Names are anchors, the custodian replied. Speak it, Tony gulped. Antonio Reyes, he said, voice echoing in the vault. The shadow shivered. The custodian continued. Speak what you protect. Tony blinked, startled. What I protect? Yes. Tony's mind flashed to Maria, to Acton, to the flat, to the tired smile. He didn't hesitate. My mother, Tony said. Maria. The vault's light pulsed. The shadow's edges fluttered, like it tasted the word. The custodian's voice lowered. Speak what you refuse. Tony's chest constricted. He thought of fortune, of strength, of knowledge, of immortality. He thought of Eleanor's eyes, and the way she looked at him like a variable, not a person. He thought of the feeling of power, tempting him like warmth. Tony's voice came out rough. I refuse to take power that hurts others, he said, even if it helps me. The words rang through the vault. And for the first time, the shadow reacted sharply. It recoiled. Not in fear, in anger. The vault's air snapped cold. Tony flinched. The custodian spoke again, calm as ever. Sufficient, it said. Tony blinked. Sufficient? The consequence? Resists. The custodian replied. That resistance confirms it matters. The shadow surged forward. Tony's body screamed to move, but he stayed rooted. He didn't know if he was brave or just too tired to be anything else. The shadow's hand hovered inches from Tony's chest. It did not touch. It waited. Consent. Tony's throat constricted. What happens if I let it? He whispered. The custodian's voice was quiet now, almost intimate against the vast stone. Then it becomes yours, it said, not to wield. To bear. Tony's hands shook. What does that even mean? It will follow you. the custodian said. Warn you. Weigh you. It will be drawn to vaults and to those who would break them. Tony stared at the shadow. A consequence as a companion, a haunting as a guide. He felt a strange, unwanted understanding. This was the vault's way of making sure he couldn't walk away. Tony gulped. If I say no, he whispered, it follows me anyway. Yes. And if I say yes, it follows me, but under rules. Yes. Tony's lips parted. He wanted to scream, to demand something fair. But fairness wasn't part of this system. Restraint was. Tony took a slow breath. Then quietly, he spoke. Yes, he said. Under rules. The shadow inhaled. The vault's light flared. And the consequence stepped forward and entered him. Not like a body entering a body, but like cold smoke sliding under a door. Tony gasped, arching, every nerve flaring with ice. He fell to his knees, palms slamming against stone. His vision swam. For a moment, he saw nothing but darkness. Then he saw something worse. He saw the land above, through stone, through earth. He saw Eleanor and Marcus in the mist outside, pacing, tense. He saw the two other figures with them, watching the hill like they could feel it breathing. He saw the warden on the ridge, still and patient. And then, just at the edge of his vision, he saw something else moving across the hills. Fast, low, not human. Tony sucked in a breath, eyes wide. What is that? He whispered, voice shaking. The custodian answered, calm as ever. Your visibility begins. Tony's blood ran cold because the thing in the hills turned, as if it had heard him. And then it started coming toward the vault. The custodian did not move, but the vault changed anyway. The pale light that had pooled on the platform thinned, running in delicate veins across the stone floor, like a living network retreating into itself. The symbols dimmed. The air loosened a fraction, as if the chamber had stopped holding its breath. Tony stayed on his knees, palms flat on the cold stone, breathing like he'd just sprinted up a hill. Because in a way, he had. Not physically, internally. His chest still felt too tight for his ribs. His skin still prickled with lingering cold. And worst of all, his senses were wrong now. Not broken, expanded. He could feel the weight of the land above him, not as pressure, but as presence. Like he'd been living inside a radio with the volume turned down, and someone had just twisted the dial. Tony forced air through his teeth. Is that permanent? Tony asked, voice scraping. The custodian answered immediately, as if it had been waiting for the question. The cost is not alone, it said. It is a change. Tony gave a short laugh that came out almost like a choke. So I'm stuck being noticeable now. You offered, the custodian said. Tony wanted to argue. He wanted to say he hadn't understood what he was offering, that no one had explained it properly, that it was unfair to make a 19-year-old decide something like that in the dark. But the vault had never pretended it was fair. It had only pretended it was honest. Tony pushed himself upright slowly, legs shaking. He glanced at the center platform, where the freestanding door had been. Gone. Only faint etchings remained, like a memory of a choice. What happens now? Tony asked. The custodian's shifting surface angled toward him. Now you must leave, it said. Tony blinked. That's it? After all that? The custodian's voice resonated. Deeper now. No, it said. After this is consequence. Tony's stomach tightened. Tony could still see it in his mind's eye, the thing crossing the hills above, fast and low, turning as if it had heard him speak through stone. He forced down air. That thing outside. He said quietly, "Is it coming for me?" The custodian answered with its usual calm. "It is coming, because you can be found," it said. Tony's hands curled into fists. "So what? I just go out there and get chased?" The custodian didn't respond to the tone. "You will be tested again," it said. "The vault does not end when you exit it." Tony exhaled slowly, forcing his thoughts into a line. "Eleanor is out there," he said. "She's waiting." "Yes. And there's a warden on the ridge." "Yes." Tony's mouth went dry. "Does the warden stop people like Eleanor?" The custodian's surface rippled faintly. "The warden enforces rules," it said. "Not fairness." Tony almost laughed again. "Of course. Then, what do I do?" Tony asked. Quieter now. The custodian's voice lowered. "You close what you opened," it said. Tony's chest constricted. "I did close it," he said, remembering the awful rush of knowledge, the way he'd claimed and relinquished it. The custodian answered with a finality Tony could feel in his bones. "You closed the door," it said, "not the breach." Tony froze. What breach? The vault's light dimmed another notch. And Tony suddenly realized what the custodian meant. When the hill's door had opened, it hadn't opened just for him. It had opened the system to movement. It had made something possible. It had let attention leak through the network. Tony gulped. "How do I close the breach?" he asked. The custodian's voice became almost a whisper against the stone. "You must seal your trace." Tony stared. "My trace, yes," the custodian said. "You entered. You were measured. You were altered. Now you leave a mark." Tony's stomach sank. "And that mark is what things can follow," he whispered. The custodian did not correct him. Tony's hands shook. "Can you do it?" Tony asked, hatefully hopeful. "Can you seal it?" A pause. Then, "No." Tony's jaw clenched. "Why not?" "Because it would be meaningless," the custodian said. "A closed breach without choice proves nothing." Tony's throat constricted. So it had to be him. It always had to be him. "Okay," Tony said, forcing down the fear. "Tell me how." The custodian lifted its hand. The vault answered. A shallow groove appeared in the stone floor in front of Tony, like a channel carved by water over centuries. It led away from the platform toward a darker corridor in the wall he hadn't noticed before. "Walk," the custodian said. "Do not run." Tony blinked. "Why?" "Running makes fear loud," the custodian replied. "Loud fear draws attention." Tony felt a cold irony in that. Attention had already been drawn, but he nodded anyway. He adjusted his backpack strap and stepped onto the channel. The stone under his feet was colder here, and the corridor ahead swallowed light like it was hungry. Tony's breath fogged as he walked. The corridor was narrow at first, forcing his shoulders to brush the walls. The air smelled of damp stone and something else. Something metallic, like rain on old iron. He kept his pace steady, Do not run, he told himself again. He reached a point where the corridor opened into a second chamber, smaller than the first, but more deliberate. The ceiling was low and curved. The floor was smooth, etched with a single symbol, a circle with a line through it, like an eye shut tight. At the center of the room stood a shallow basin carved from stone, empty. Tony stopped, staring. He felt the presence of the custodian behind him, though he couldn't see it. The seal, the custodian said. Your trace will be placed here. Tony's mouth went dry. What do you mean placed? The custodian's voice was matter of fact. Blood. It said. Tony's stomach lurched. No. Tony blurted instantly. No, I'm not doing that. The chamber didn't react. The custodian didn't argue. Your refusal is noted, the voice said. Tony's breathing quickened. He had imagined fear and monsters and ancient doors. He had not imagined this. I'm not doing blood, Tony said, voice shaking. That's not. It is not ritual, the custodian said. It is anchor. Tony forced himself to think. Visibility was the consequence. The ongoing cost of being here, of being marked, of offering himself to the system, that would never go away. But this, the blood seal, was different. This was mechanical, a lock, a way to prevent others from using his trace to open what he had opened. Two different things. Visibility, the price. Blood seal, the lock. Tony gulped. What happens if I do it? He asked quietly. The custodian answered. Your trace becomes sealed to you, it said. It will not be used by another entity. Tony frowned. Used? Yes, the custodian said. Those who know how to read vaults can use your trace to open what you opened. Tony's blood turned cold. Eleanor, the acquirers, they weren't just chasing him for the map. They were chasing him because he was now a key. Tony's jaw tightened. Okay, he said softly. Okay. He dug into his bag with shaking fingers and pulled out the small pocket knife Liam had insisted he carry, just in case. Tony stared at it in his palm. Just metal, just a tool, like a blood test, he thought. Maria's done 1,000 of these, pricked her finger at the clinic more times than he could count. It was just biology, just proof. He exhaled. This is ridiculous, he muttered, half to himself. The custodian did not respond. Tony held the knife to the side of his thumb, hesitating, not because it would hurt, because it made this real. He cut a small slice, sharp sting, immediate warmth, blood welled. Tony clenched his teeth and held his thumb over the basin. A few drops fell into the stone bowl. The basin did not glow. There was no dramatic flare. Instead, the blood spread across the stone like ink on paper, forming lines that weren't visible a moment earlier. A symbol appeared. Not one Tony recognized. It looked like a closed eye. Then the symbol sank into the stone, absorbed. The sting in Tony's thumb eased strangely fast, as if the vault didn't want to take more than necessary. Tony breathed out shakily. Is it done? He asked. The custodian's voice came from behind him. Quieter now. Yes, it said. Tony's shoulders sagged with relief he didn't fully understand. Then the custodian spoke again, and its words carried weight Tony hadn't expected. Your trace now carries weight within the network, it said. When balance is threatened, speak with clarity and precision. The system responds to deliberate command. Tony frowned, turning slightly. What does that mean? Your seal is not passive, the custodian replied. It is an anchor. If forces threaten what you have closed, clear speech can invoke enforcement. Tony's mind struggled to process this. So I can, what? Give orders? Not orders, the custodian said. Boundaries. The network will recognize your authority over what you have sealed. Tony stored that away, unsure what it meant, but sensing it mattered. Then a sound echoed through the corridor behind him. A scrape. Slow. Heavy. Not Eleanor. Not Marcus. Something older. Something that belonged to stone. Tony's blood went cold. He turned. In the corridor's mouth, where the darkness met the dim light of this chamber, a shape was emerging. Not the shadow consequence. Not the custodian. This was physical. It stepped forward, and Tony's mind fumbled for comparisons. It was like a deer made of rock. No, not deer. Larger, more angular. Its legs were thick, jointed wrong, carved like pillars. Its body was bulky and uneven, like it had been built from broken pieces of slate and basalt. Its head was narrow, with ridges where eyes should be, but no eyes visible, just smooth stone. And it was silent, except for the scrape of stone on stone as it moved. Tony stumbled back instinctively. Is that, he began, a tracker? The custodian said, an internal guardian. It patrols the vault system to maintain balance within. Tony's throat tightened. It's here because of me? Tony asked. It is here because you opened, the custodian replied, and because something outside is approaching. Tony's heart slammed. So this thing protects the vault? It protects internal balance, the custodian said. Not you. The tracker stepped fully into view. Its head tilted slightly, like it was scenting the air. Tony's stomach twisted. It didn't have a nose, but he could feel it searching anyway. Then the tracker's head turned directly toward Tony. The air went tight. Tony's body screamed again to run, but the custodian's instruction echoed. Do not run. Tony forced himself to stay still, to breathe slowly, to be quiet. The tracker advanced one step. Tony's hand drifted toward his backpack strap, knuckles white. The custodian's voice came again, low and precise. Speak the third rule, it said. Tony stared. What third rule? The custodian's tone sharpened for the first time. You have learned it, it said. Speak it. Tony's mind raced. First rule. Opening is easier than closing. Second rule. If you enter, you will not be alone. Third. Tony's eyes flicked to the tracker. It was watching. The consequence inside him stirred like cold fog. And suddenly, Tony understood. The third rule wasn't written. It was lived. Tony gulped. He spoke. Voice trembling but clear. Fear is a signal, he said, not a command. The chamber seemed to settle. The tracker stopped. Its head lowered slightly, like it was considering him. The custodian's voice softened again. The vault accepts this, it said. Tony's breath shook. The tracker turned away. Not fully, but enough. It stepped back into the corridor, retreating into darkness like a threat that had been postponed rather than defeated. Tony stared, stunned. "What just happened?" he whispered. The custodian's reply was simple. "You did not lead it," it said. "You did not run. You did not make your fear loud." Tony gulped. "So it doesn't follow me?" The custodian paused. "It follows breaches," it said. "You sealed yours." Tony's knees felt weak. He exhaled, long and shaky. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay, then let me out." The corridor behind him brightened faintly, and Tony realized the vault was guiding him toward the exit. He followed the channel back, thumb stinging lightly, heart thundering. As he approached the main chamber again, he felt the custodian's presence behind him, like a wall. He stopped and turned, forcing down air. "Am the first done?" Tony asked. The custodian's shifting form stood at the center platform again, tall and quiet. "You are not done," it said. "You are begun." Tony's throat constricted. "What about the map?" he asked. "What do I do with it?" The custodian's voice resonated. "The map will continue," it said. "So long as you do." Tony gulped. "And the consequence?" "The thing inside me." The custodian's tone did not change. "It will warn," it said. "It will weigh. It will draw you toward what must be closed." Tony's stomach tightened. "So I'm basically cursed?" The custodian paused, then said, "Responsible." Tony stared. Responsible. It sounded heavier than cursed. Tony looked away, jaw tight. "How do I leave?" he asked. The custodian lifted its hand. The vault door behind Tony appeared again as a seam of light in the stone wall. It began to open. Cold wind poured in from outside. Not the stale underground cold. Highland cold. Real world cold. Tony flinched at the sudden brightness. He took one step toward the opening, then hesitated. "What about Eleanor?" he asked, voice low. "If she tries to open it?" The custodian answered without hesitation. "She cannot," it said. "Not without your trace." Tony's blood chilled. "My trace is sealed." "Yes," Tony exhaled, relief and dread twisting together. "So they'll keep chasing me," he whispered. "Yes." Tony nodded slowly. He stepped toward the door, and as he crossed the threshold, the custodian spoke one final time behind him. "Antonio Reyes," it said. Tony paused. "Yes." The voice lowered, and for the first time, there was something almost like warning in it. "Do not mistake being seen for being safe." Tony gulped. Then he stepped out into the highlands. The world hit him like a slap. Wind, sharp and clean, light, gray and wide. The hill's mouth gaped behind him for a heartbeat, then sealed itself as if it had never existed. Tony staggered and turned. No seam, no door, only grass and stone. His heart hammered. He was out. He was alive, and he was immediately not alone. Eleanor stood 30 meters away, coat snapping in the wind. Marcus was beside her. The two other figures were there too, flanking them like professionals. And further up on the ridge, still as a statue, the warden watched. Eleanor's eyes locked onto Tony the second he emerged. Her expression wasn't triumph. It was calculation. "Tony!" she called, voice carrying across the moor. "You came out." Tony's mouth went dry. He felt different, not just inside. Even the way Eleanor looked at him was different, like she could see him more clearly now, like his veil had truly been removed. Tony's fingers tightened on his backpack strap. Eleanor took a slow step forward. "Give me the map," she said calmly, "and we can all walk away from this." Tony's heart pounded. He could feel the consequence inside him stir, cold and alert. A warning, not words. A pressure in his skull, like a finger pointing. Tony's gaze flicked right, then left, and he saw it. Movement in the heather. Fast, low, the thing from his vision. But now it was real, cutting across the hills toward them. Not toward the vault, toward the people. Not the tracker from inside. This was something else entirely. Leaner, faster, built for pursuit, not patrol. An external consequence drawn by Tony's new visibility. A predator that hunted those marked by the network. Toward Eleanor. Tony's blood ran cold. Eleanor was still talking, unaware. "I'm offering you protection," she said. "Money, safety, your mother taken care of. You don't have to do this alone." Tony gulped. His instinct screamed to shout, "Move! Something's coming." But he remembered what the custodian had said. Fear is a signal, not a command. Visibility is not safety. And the biggest truth of all, Eleanor did not protect. She acquired. Tony took a slow breath. He spoke clearly, voice carrying. "I can't give you the map," he said. Eleanor's jaw tightened. "Tony," she warned, softer now. "Don't be stupid." Tony's eyes stayed on the heather, where the movement grew nearer. "This isn't about treasure," Tony said. "It's about balance." Eleanor frowned, irritation flashing. "You don't even know what you're saying?" Tony's mouth went dry. He did know, not fully, but enough. He took one step back. Eleanor's eyes sharpened. Marcus shifted. One of the other figures lifted a hand toward his coat, like he might be reaching for something hidden. Tony's heart slammed. Then the thing in the heather surged into view. A shape like a hound made of shadow and bone. Not blood, not gore, but wrongness. Its body was lean and too long, its limbs moving like water over rock. Its head was low, and when it lifted its face toward the wind, Tony saw two pale points of light where eyes should be. It didn't roar. It didn't snarl. It simply ran, silent as thought, straight toward them. Eleanor froze. For the first time since Tony had met her, her confidence cracked. "What is that?" she snapped. Marcus's posture tightened. "Eleanor," the creature, closed, distance, vast. Tony's whole body locked. He felt the consequence inside him flare, cold and urgent, like a bell rung underwater. A warning, a pull. Do something. Tony's hands shook. He wasn't strong. He wasn't armed. He wasn't a hero from a book. He was a boy who cleaned graves, but he had learned something inside the vault. Closing is harder than opening, and sometimes closing meant choosing restraint or choosing action with cost. Tony stepped forward. Eleanor stared at him. Shocked. Tony. Get back. Tony raised his injured thumb, the small cut still visible, and remembered the custodian's words. Your trace now carries weight. When balance is threatened, speak with clarity and precision. He shouted the word like a boundary, not a plea. Stop. The word snapped out into the air like a command. The creature skidded, not because it was afraid of Tony, because the land responded. The heather beneath it darkened, flattening as if pressed by invisible weight. The creature's limbs stiffened mid-stride, like it had run into a wall made of authority. Tony's breath caught. He didn't fully understand what he'd done, but the vault did. The consequence inside him surged, and suddenly Tony felt it. A thin thread connecting him to the sealed hill behind him, like a leash made of rules. The creature strained against the invisible force. It couldn't break through, but it could wait. Tony's legs shook. Eleanor stared at him now, with something new in her eyes. Not interest, not calculation, fear. What are you? She whispered. Tony gulped, voice trembling. I'm trying to close what I opened, he said. The creature's pale eyes fixed on Tony. It didn't struggle now. It watched him, patient, like it had all the time in the world. The warden on the ridge did not move, but Tony felt its attention sharpen, as if it had seen Tony's choice, as if it was weighing the same thing the custodian had weighed. Tony's mouth went dry. Eleanor stepped back slowly, eyes still on Tony. Marcus's gaze darted between Tony and the creature, calculating escape routes. The wind whipped around them, hard and cold. Tony lowered his hand. The invisible force held. The creature remained pinned by rule. For now, Tony looked at Eleanor. Leave, he said, voice low. Right now, Eleanor's lips parted, shocked at being told what to do by a boy she'd tried to buy. Then her eyes narrowed. You can't keep it from us forever, she said. Tony didn't answer. He didn't need to. The creature's eyes flicked toward Eleanor, like it could hear her greed the way dogs heard whistles. Eleanor saw it. She gulped, then nodded once, stiffly. Fine, she said. Not today. She backed away, never turning her back fully. Marcus followed. Tense, the two other figures retreated with them, moving quickly now, no longer confident. They disappeared into the mist. Tony stood alone in the wind, trembling. The creature still watched him, and the warden still watched everything. Tony's throat constricted. He realized something terrible. He'd stopped it, but he hadn't defeated it. He'd merely held the line. The consequence inside him cooled slightly, settling into an uneasy quiet. A warning. A promise. Tony glanced back at the hill. No door. No seam. Just grass and stone like the world, pretending nothing had happened. Tony forced down air. Above, the sky had begun to shift, clouds thinning just enough to let pale light through. A single bird broke from the heather and circled overhead. Then another. Then 3 more. All of them watching him. All of them seeing him now. Tony's visibility was real. Even the wildlife knew it. He turned away from the hill and started walking. Not toward Edinburgh. Not back the way he'd come. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Signal returning now that he was outside. He pulled it out with shaking fingers. 3 messages from Zara. Zara, Tony, the symbol appeared on another map. Someone else is looking. Zara, they're asking questions in Edinburgh about you. Zara, where are you? Please answer. Tony's blood went cold. If Eleanor knew about the map, she knew who he'd talk to. Zara, Liam, his mother. Tony's jaw tightened. He couldn't go home. Not yet. Not directly. Home wasn't safe anymore. The creature behind him remained frozen in the heather, waiting for the rules to weaken. The warden on the ridge remained still, watching, judging, enforcing nothing yet. And somewhere out there, Eleanor was already planning her next move. Tony started walking faster, heading toward the road, toward a bus, toward anywhere that wasn't here. Because the vault had let him leave, but it had not let him go. And now, he had people to warn before the visibility found them too. This was a story run, a cinematic audio adventure built to be heard, not skimmed. If this story pulled you forward, subscribe for more journeys into hidden places, sealed doors, and moments where turning back is no longer an option. The run continues.